Good afternoon, Hank.
Hi, this is Hank.
Hello there.
Hi, Bob. How are you doing?
How's your afternoon?
Scalding hot for, relatively speaking, for Germany, as it has been in this month.
Oh my.
It's fine. Actually, so the humidity is down. That's I bought an AC actually.
Oh no.
Yeah, very green.
Goes the power grid.
Not. It's not. It's like this two-piece thingy with the radiator outside, and I still have to set it up.
We call them a split.
A split, yes, a split. And the radiator, to my surprise, creates a lot of humidity. So basically, they have condensating water there on that part.
Yeah.
I don't know how the physics works here, but I was surprised. Let's call it that. I would assume that the water would be produced on the cooling part and not on the radiating part, but sure, why not? Maybe it's kind of getting it outside somehow with this connection. But yeah, that's where I am right now. So I should install it better. I did not yet. I am. This is the European summer vacation time, so I'm actually not sure how many people will show up today. But we have at least one PR.
Yeah. Oh.
Are you still traveling that lot? That much?
I haven't been, but I'm about to start. I think I've got like 4 trips in September, maybe 3 trips in September.
Yeah, September will be local. I will not move out of Germany, I think. But then international work starts in October. So October, November are international days in general. So yeah. Months, international months in general, and then standardization kicks in again. I've been on vacation too much, so I think I try to join all these calls, and we are still. Oh no, where's the third one? Ray is here, and Steve. Okay, that's good.
And Antoine. Greetings, everyone.
Perfect. That is lovely. Let me go to, is our camera on? No, of course it's not. Swoop.
There it is.
Yeah, and you are not just coming by to give us permissions, right? You're here?
Until I called away.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Oh, wait.
You called it.
Okay. He's here until he's called away.
Ah, okay. Duty calls or one sailing thing?
Duty calls in this case. This is a picture, not real this time.
Yeah, sure. At this point, I don't think that can't be true.
I have been on sailing dating groups trying to get a ride for next week, so.
Okay. Yeah, so it's 3 past the hour, and I'm happy that Antoine, Ray, Bob, Steve, you're here. This is in Europe already. Maybe I don't know how much this reflects to the US. This is summer vacation time. Some are coming back. Most are still out. That is a little bit of a valley here. And I'm happy to have critical mass to do some things because Hannes, our esteemed chair, got too much time on his hands and did something good, which is basically highlighting a lot of new issues. Having said that, we already have like 51 of them. And so for once, as we are not pressured to submit in like 2 weeks or anything, we could go through his one PR, which an actual proposal addressing, I think, at least one of the, well, it's not done yet, I see. Maybe not for merging right now, but we could at least go through the issues, assign them, and see who's doing them, and then walk through the list. Steve, do you want to look a little bit at the older ones first, or do you want to have start with the fresh ones? because I have to
Let's
admit
start
that
with the
harnesses are
fresh
very photogenic.
ones.
Yeah.
Just because they're active. I was planning I'm taking next week off, and then I'll have a bunch of time available to work on this. So I was gonna go and cull through the old ones, cleaning it up. So let's, because a lot of them just gone stale. So rather than do a team event here, let's go through the active ones. Is what I would suggest. Do you want to do? And I'm sorry, did you say you wanted to do the first PR that Hannes opened?
Yeah, no, I thought so. And the very first thing I read was like is in progress or something. Okay, we can't really work on something that's still moving. At least for merging questions, we could have a look. I would assume that assigning assignees to the newest issues is topics so as a topic well served. And also, of course, micro agenda bash. So typically, when we have nothing pressing on the agenda, we do issues and PRs, which makes a lot of sense. But I also want to ask for a agenda bashing, so to speak, against the default agenda. Does anybody have an item for today they feel is urgent and is a good topic for today?
So again, I've not been able to have as much time recently, so I'm still feel like I'm catching up. I know that there was a conversation on feeds, but that was, I know Ori and John were active on that conversation. Is that something we want to do here, or we want to do in the other meeting? How would help me with where we want to think about that?
Actually, I want to say we want to do it here, but also I would say we need either John, at least Ori here to do it. I haven't pinged him manually today, and we have let's plan this for next week.
Okay.
I propose.
Okay. I may or may not be available next week, but following, it'll get better by mid-September.
Okay. Which is a month. Okay. But
yeah, that's.
I'm
off
okay
next
now.
week.
I'm here.
And the following week, I'll be in Europe, so that might work. But I'll be at an offsite, so I don't know if I'll have time.
Okay, let's start with 89, which is the oldest Hannes one, and go from there up. It's harmonizing.
I looked at all three of the Hannes issues. I think they are relatively easy to fix, but actually this one is probably the hardest one. Yeah. Which is about the overuse of should without clarifying under which condition.
Oh.
All right, which one are we on? 89?
No. Antoine is on 91.
Oh, sorry.
I think.
Oh yes, I was on 91. Sorry, I misunderstood the number.
Which one do we want to do?
Yeah, we can start with 89. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that one I think. Okay, first of all, I thought it was in the terminology, but also I think we want to separate between those. I think we had three classes. One of them was so there is a bigger class which are verifiers, and within verifiers we are distinguishing between auditors and consumers, with the expectation that auditors may be able to do more than consumers. But I think verifier is a technical term in the architecture, and as part of that, there are auditors and consumers that are two use cases for verification. So I don't think we should pattern all of them for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, are verifiers and auditors types of consumers? Is that a way to think about it?
No, I think auditors and consumers are types of verifiers.
Yes, that's right.
And I thought it was explaining the terminology at some point, but maybe it isn't.
Yeah, we never did do this consumers.
Okay.
That is, there was something there. Can you scroll down to see what you have for verifiers in the terminology? Oh, we don't have. Yeah, we do have verifier. Yes.
And we're saying an entity that consumes. So
Yes,
I know we
that's the
debated
most
this a little bit.
generic one. And so I think that one should include consumers and editors.
I'm sorry, that one should what?
So that looks like the most general, but I'm not sure why it is now listed as a specialization of sign statement consumer. So there seems to be a swap between verifier and consumer between my understanding and Antoine's and what's currently in the document.
So I remember us discussing, and we don't have it here, producer. There was the concept of a producer and consumer to define the two, the people that write and the people that read. And then there's classifications of those I thought we were trying to do. So there's anybody that's just trying to read from it is considered a consumer. It's not consumer as in the I buy an Apple phone kind of thing. It's just I'm consuming.
Okay. So if it's sign statement consumer and as opposed to consumer of the artifact, then I think there is no ambiguity. And I think consumer then is the more generic one. Yes.
Okay.
Now I think between consumers and verifiers, I'm not sure you want to separate the two. I don't see who would consume sign statement without verifying them.
That's a good question, but consumer is defined in the introduction. It's basically the parties that put things into the introduction is section 1, and at the bottom of section 1, I think, relative to the bottom.
Yes,
there's a numbered item list. Now just scroll to introduction.
Yeah, so under consumers we have.
Yeah, if we scroll down
between consumers and verifiers, then can't we just
and a little bit more? Yeah, there it is. So so this is
I see. Yeah, this is where the producers and consumers got defined. Okay.
Okay, and that's fine, but then why separate between verifiers and consumers?
Yeah, I don't think it's right, though, to say that consumers will always verify. A lot of them won't. And they'll say, it depends on what they want to do. But a lot of them will just trust.
What verification includes, right? So verification could be signature checking. Sometimes that called is validation. Validation could also be message integrity. That's maybe only true for what we do for the proofs. So there's a lot of ambiguity using the term validation or verification in all realms, and I think we must embed them. If I hear there is ambiguity, basically consumers and verifiers are synonyms, I would strike the term verify completely because it's super confusing. No, it's not.
Are verifiers actions of a consumer?
So I think, as Cedric said, verifier is a very specific technical term. It's someone that verifies receipts, right? Consumer is more general.
Sign statements, also statements.
Yeah, I guess. So I think verifies refers to the action of checking receipts and signatures. Consumer is just consuming claims, right? Or consuming statements.
Yes. So I think if
so just from a point of a registry,
is fine. I think the tension that we have is that in full generality, some consumers may not verify or may only partially verify, whereas as we write the architecture, you prefer all consumers to verify. So we want to push people to verify, but we don't want to. If you think we are losing something important, then we may still want to say that verification is something that consumers should do as opposed to something that defines consumer.
Okay. So what I hear is that a consumer may or not may verify. So is it feasible to say that we do not want to attach the activity, so we want to attach the term verify to a role? Because otherwise the consumer would take on the role of a consumer and also sometimes or sometimes not the role of a verifier. So that seems weird.
I think there is no point in separating the roles of consumers and verifiers. If you don't merge the two, then consumers should be the role and verification should be one of their action.
Okay, now this is where I think there's a problem with the level of the API that people are thinking about, because certainly if you have a transparency service, you want to make data transparent artifacts available. it's not just a matter of verifying that the hash value matches the thing that's in the registry. So there's different levels here. And so I think that this, what's happened here, it's all been munged into one. And at least in my mind, that's what makes it very confusing. If we just can stick to the lower level API and say this is just about that, you know, what's in the, you know, Merkle tree or whatever it is, then maybe it'll be easier to sort this out. Thanks.
What do we see, like from a SCITT instance, and I'm sorry, SCITT instance or registry, which do we call it?
Well, whatever. It's
Transparency. Okay, a SCITT an instance.
Yeah.
From that perspective, so the thing is running. What do we see the term consumer versus verifier being different from the APIs it calls? Like the actions might be different. Somebody could walk, somebody could.
So that's okay. I think that's easy. And from the viewpoint of a transparency service, consumers are quite far away. Typically, consumers will not contact the transparency service. They will just be given a transparent statement, and they will hopefully verify it and then rely on their contents. But consumers are not the transparency service clients.
Yeah, I think consumers is a very dangerous word.
But that's why, Ray, I'm sorry. Is that what we're talking about? Is consumers the people that buy iPhones and go shopping?
No. So I think I clarify that it's consumers of transparent statements, not of artifacts. So it's consumer of transparent statements, and so they are. We have production in two phases. So there is issuance and then registration, and then consumers are at the receiving end of signed transparent statement. So now, because you can verify transparent statements as a local operation, you need not contact the transparency service. So it's not a natural split as a client and clients of the transparency service, and that's okay. So I think using consumers to refer to whoever is going to consume transparent statements as it is defined now, it's fine. The main ambiguity is whether we want to insist on them verifying or not. And I get the point that in full generality, we may be losing, oversimplifying by merging the two, in which case I think referring them as consumers is fine. And then we should refer to verification, not to verifiers, because I don't see why you would define two separate roles. In that case, verification is really an action, not a role.
Right.
Just a quick question. Yeah, it says in the consumer part, it does not say transparent statement. And I just found that should be here. Consumers are the actors, I want to say right now, that consume a transparent statement, either by client and they kind of got it, or they just got it via USB thumb drive. Who cares? They have it, and they're interested in the transparent statement. That's why they're the consumer. And it says here that it's validating supply chain artifacts. And could that be, sorry for the pun, an artifact? This should not, the term artifact should be purged from this document. Is that correct? Or are we still using artifact?
No, we still have it.
No.
Can we look at the terminology instead of that text?
Yeah, please, yeah. As you can see, I've been off for quite some while. And so a physical and non-physical item that is moving along so the statement is about the artifact, okay?
Yes.
That's wonderful. Okay, that is how, okay, this brings up old memories. This is the thing that some people want to name product.
Yes.
I think that's a nuance. Yeah, okay, I remember. So
yes.
now a consumer.
And now consumers, I think it's not consumer of signed statement. It should be consumer of transparent signed statement. And referring to authentic statement in the text you are reading before, I think is a bit confusing.
Right.
Yeah, let me try to suggest because go back down to that section we were looking at, or is it up? Yeah. No.
I'm fine. There we go.
Yes, why is that text trying to anticipate the terminology in a different way? I'm confused by it.
So it says breadth of access is critical, blah, blah, blah. So it can cater to two types of audiences. Now, what is an audience? Usually it's people. Producers and consumers at this point, at least the way this is worded, I would think is people. Now, so
Why does it
there's
have to be
a difference
people?
here
Can you scope that, Ray?
wait a second, let me finish. There's
Okay.
a difference between people that are in the audience or you know, users of the system that are looking at you know, statements and so forth that are in a way reflective of the actual products that are, you know, in the supply chain. So there's a supply chain and there's people working on it. And some of those people are already identified as consumers and producers. So if you use those terms, you're going to get yourself in a glorious pickle. I would suggest submitters or viewers or something like that, because we're talking about submitting these artifact or these signed statements. That's what we're thinking of here. And viewing the signed statements, we're not talking about producers or consumers of products in the normal sense, you know what I'm saying? And that might help things to realize that there's the view of the actual products in the supply chain, and then there's the view of all the documentation that goes with it, which are the artifacts that we're talking about. And maybe the artifact, we can clarify, the artifact is the documentation about the supply chain object. Or something to differentiate between, or maybe it'd be good to have even a little picture showing the actual supply chain, the documentation that goes along with the supply chain, and then the third level is the submissions to the transparency service about the documentation that's talking about the stuff in the supply chain. So there's really three things here. Thanks.
Yeah, so but at the moment, artifacts are actual supply chain things. Statements is the documentation you're talking about. And then the transparency service is up-leveling those statements via the services provided.
Yeah.
So
I think those three, differentiating those three things would be very, very helpful to say, look, there's products in the supply chain, there's documentations about the products. Those things are then it's assigned statements about the documentation that we handle at this point. And so there's three levels of indirection here. Thank you.
So I really think we should structure those discussions on terminology into identifying what are the concepts that we want to describe and separate, and then how we are going to refer to them. It's like for example, whether we call something an artifact or a product. We had that discussion in the past. We can reopen that, but that's separate from trying to understand whether consumers and verifiers and auditors are the same categories or not. So I think we should carefully separate in the discussions whether we are renaming existing concepts or we are trying to figure out whether some concepts should be separated or fused. And I think the latter is probably what we should start with. So there, I think we agree that we need the general category of people who are processing transparent signed statements, and that consumers is the term that we pick for that, and that's a fine term. The question that remains is whether we want verifiers to be a special class of consumers that actually verify things. And as I argued, I think verification is the action, and I don't see the point of separating the roles. We should encourage people to verify, but it's not a different role of whether you intend to verify or not. And similarly, I think auditors, separately, I think auditors or monitors, depending on what you want to use, from certificate transparency, is an important class of consumers that is worth defining. So now the fact that we define, maybe I'm biased because that's the part of the text I understand the best, but I think this long description introducing all the terms of the terminology and inconsistent with the terminology is a problem in the current state of the document. And I'd rather first fix the terminology than simplify it and introduce them in that introduction, rather than have the terminology in the introduction being compatible with the terminology in the list below.
Yeah, there's this weird thing that you sometimes need terms early on before you can get the whole context, and then you need the context to define the terminology. That is,
and I think a bit of
always
redundancy is okay. Being consistent is really much damaging for clarity.
Yeah. So what I would, okay. That's a question to you, Cedric. Do you want to take up a first try, or shall I? Because
so
I think you have
if you don't mind, I can do a pass trying to align the two, and provided we agree that we keep consumers at the general role with the auditor as a
but it has to be very clear
yes.
that artifacts are not the things produced and consumed. We are not talking about the actual value chain graph supply chain thing. Yeah, we are talking about the
we are talking about the production and the consumption of statements and their transparent variance.
Yeah, it's consumption of things in a SCITT ledger.
Yes,
exactly. And then I think Ray, it might be still be okay to say producer and consumer, but especially in the service IETF world, that's a common referral to.
I know that it's common in IETF world, but you're talking supply chain, you're spanning worlds here. And the biggest problems I found when you do that, when you go from IETF over to like general purpose supply chain concepts, is people use same words for different things and they never communicate right. And so you got to be very, very careful not to use the terms that you think are common for and are already being used for something else. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a little graphic because I think it's going to be helpful along these lines, because it's going to help me. And then maybe you guys can say, no, that's not it at all. And then that'll be even more helpful if that happens. Hey, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Let's next week. Cedric, can you commit to that task for next Tuesday?
Okay. So I'll do a pass on the terminology and look at inconsistencies and try to fix to get some more uniformity in the pull request. Yes.
Yeah, and
since we've done these passes before on fixing terminology, I would suggest focusing on a couple of terms in each PR. Like,
yes, I will only focus on the consumers in that process.
Yeah, like I wouldn't touch the concept of artifacts and products, because it'll just you'll keep on unspiraling it. If you keep it focused just on consumers and verifiers, I think that one will get a more focused conversation.
I would actually focus
on consumers, but that will include auditors as well, right?
Yeah, it would
in a sense, in the scope of the pull request that we are discussing from.
I think if you focus on this issue,
exactly.
Yes, maybe you can assign that one to me, and
it literally includes all the options you just highlighted. So I was like, yeah, that's good.
Where are you?
I'm going to try to take a fresh look at it, even though I'm being upset at 3 things. Thank you.
Cedric, what's your
second name?
Oh, oh, sorry. I keep on getting Antoine messed up with that one.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, but in any case, consumer, and it only appears once in the body, which is in 5.3. So I don't think it's really a discussion that only impacts this introduction, really.
Yes, I think we are using verifiers before, because it's a more technical and precise term. But
it's a precise term because every time where we talk about verifying transparency, then it's a verifier because it's a consumer that verifies. So I don't think we can really use consumer anywhere else in the text.
It would be very, very okay if we want to use verification or the term verifier. It must be well known and well specified what the mandatory and optional duties are.
I think by definition, verifier is someone who verifies. So
I assume you're writing.
Yeah, verifies what? A RETS attestation? No, it doesn't. There's a verifier. So verifiers and RETS are very well defined. and you don't send them attestation results. They wouldn't know what to do with them. And so they are defined by the messages they consume and produce. And it's a very known remote attestation term that is established 20 years ago by the TCGPA.
Well,
and so now
is broader than attestation. You cannot just
I know
we can just avoid every term that is used in
quite
RAS, otherwise it's
difficult to
untenable.
use. So if you tell me it's signature checking and checking the proof, I would immediately understand what you mean.
Yes, it's look at the definition. It's in the terminology. It's literally there. It's someone who verifies the. So
Yeah,
that's
Very close in a
terminology.
sense. Signed transparent statement is a generalization of signatures, and for signatures, we are not going to talk about people verifying signatures as consumers. We could, but it's just losing precision.
So
I mean,
we
it's
do a
just-
double hand. We do a digital hand and a waving hand. So one of the things being off for a while in other spaces and trying to get more people involved in this, what I have heard consistently is, amongst other things, is there's too much complexity. They don't understand all the terms. So the more we can distill this down to fewer concepts, the more likely we can get more people involved.
But in this case, the problem term is consumer. It's not verifier. In fact, consumer is useless in a way because it's confusing and people think consumer means artifact consumer. So I think the real problem in what we are discussing is really consumer, not verifier.
Yeah, I agree.
I think
it's
of
not
the two
verifier,
things
but there was some
as
pushback earlier.
if you think about consumers being, in all due respect to Ray's point of consumers being the people that buy, gadgets and stuff, I agree with it conceptually, but I think the people outside of the IETF space we're not really targeting those people. We're targeting people that are looking at deep specs. So I think there's a balance there to trying to find the right terminology. But if you think of, I'm just trying to consume information out of it, one of the actions is to verify things. And that's a superset of consumer because they're performing a particular type of action. People might consume it and may not verify. They're just trying to get the information in and hand it off to some other process. An auditor is interesting because an auditor is both a consumer and a writer. I'm assuming an auditor can put an endorsement back that says, hey, I've gone through these statements and I'm making a statement that says, as of this date, this appears intact, or this appears that it passes a certain set of compliance. So my only point is that I think producing and consuming are pretty generic terms that people can understand. Then there's actions, and verifying and auditing are good actions that we can articulate.
Auditing,
just
I don't
feedback.
know, but
what do
I
you
think
propose?
there's
Then
some
you
actions.
separate the roles and the actions. It's 4 more terms to define, so it's not simpler.
But it's composable. You can now say consumer has an optional action of verification and define verification instead of verifier. It's not more terms. It's the same number of terms, but now you can use a verification definition of consumer because it can be part of its duties. And that would make sense to me. Some other duties go to the producer, and you could define them.
So I think the question is not whether consumer or not makes sense. I think it's simple enough and generic enough that of course it makes sense. The question is it useful to structure and to understand the architecture? And because the only thing we are going to describe for consumers is verification. Arguably calling them verifiers and dropping the distinction will be a simplification. So now that's one option. The second option is to say it's important to separate between consumers and verifiers because we think it's very important that some consumers are not going to verify. And then we can pay that bit of extra complexity by keeping the 2 terms. And I thought it was a consensus. My preference will still be to get back to the verifiers and ignore other aspects of consumers, for which you don't have anything to say in the architecture, I think. But I'm fine with both. But I need to know which way we are going before I can write a pull request.
That is an excellent question, because I personally would even more be inclined, but again, this is the bias of IETF speaking with me, to drop the verifier and go with the consumer and write that its duty
Yes,
is to do verification. Yeah.
But
It
as
will be-
Antoine said, verifier is the only term we use everywhere in the rest of the text for now.
Yeah.
In the context that the question was asked, especially by Neil McBurnett, he was talking about verifying the Merkle tree, and whatever the cryptography is that we're using there is a special entity that might exist and have more access to the tree to verify that everything is consistent, rather than just a consumer of the data. So that particular type of verifier is at a different level, and I think that's what they were talking about. It's not really a consumer of the data. It's just verifying the whole tree is correct. Different role.
Yeah, something we haven't discussed in the terminology yet, because it's so we can introduce that extra category, but that's something else that doesn't help us solve whether we call things verifiers or consumers. It's another kind of verification.
So if we use that definition, we can easily set that one aside and say that's a special case, and it's what we're mostly talking about. Everybody else is either a producer, consumer, or whatever terms we want to use there, because that's all you can do. You can either submit to it or you can read from it. Done. And if you're reading from it, you can that's the whole reason you're doing it, is you're verifying something. Really, you're verifying that it's the correct signed statement and so forth that's in there. You wouldn't even be there looking unless you wanted to verify it. So
I don't see that point. There are many ways and things you can consume, and there are many ways of things you can verify. That's the terms are going to be are overly general. So that's why we need to set a more specific use in the terminology. Yeah.
But I'm just saying that specific type of verification that Neil was bringing up was that thing about verifying the tree that is kind of a different role.
It's a different action. Yes.
Yeah.
Is it a role within a category?
I say no. I say it's within. It's inside. It's kind of. I wouldn't even discuss it really at this. And you can mention it, but I wouldn't put it in as either a producer or consumer, because to me it's inside the box. Although you could say we have different realizations of how that tree system works, and we want to have external verifiers that do this, and we don't have a verification role in machine inside. So I think it may. I just don't know, but it could be talked about. It depends on how. Like I've seen some where they have internal, they have a two-part system where they have a real thing and another mirror of it, and they verify each other, and it's all part of it's all wrapped up inside. And that's one way. Or you could say, well, we don't have a verification inside. We have to do it, but someone else has to just check us from time to time. It's a different way. And so both of those are possible.
So as I said, I think we are introducing another notion. So I will first try to get a consensus on the notions we are discussing, in particular between consumers and verifiers, before we introduce another notion of verification.
Yeah.
Or consumption.
And as Ray said, the one might just be the box, and maybe it's out of scope for this round. Fine. I think. So there is symmetry between producer and consumer. If you remove consumer and only talk about verifier, you now have producer and verifier.
But sorry, Hank, but it's not a useful symmetry in as much as in our setting, it suggests it's the same symmetry as between client and server, between clients for the service. And in fact, it's not, because only the producers actually interact with the transparency service.
So would maybe issuer and verifier be better?
So if you can live with that, I would prefer to use verifier instead of consumer. Yes.
Yeah, I got that. But now producer is also old school product term. But who is producing statements other than the issuer? Yeah,
No,
it's only
it's
the issuer. Thank
either-
you.
Yes. So
Yeah,
you,
so and that is why I
I-
said we could substitute so producer consumer with issuer and verifier.
yes, we could. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
and
then
that's
becomes more
exactly
precise, and then it's very clear that the transparency service that is producing receipt is not an issuer, and
Yes,
that's a
the-
useful
also-
separation. Yes.
The downside
Excellent.
of doing this, there is a downside, which is what Ray was bringing earlier, is that it may be less clear to traditional supply for people to understand what
but
this is about.
Ray said it's confusing because producer and consumer seems like you're talking about artifacts, but instead we are talking about statements, and those have issuers and verifiers.
Yeah, I like
Sure,
that.
yes.
I like that direction. Although maybe verifier is going too far, issuer and issuee, or whoever, a reader, what the issuer is a good word. What's the opposite of that? Put that one in, because you may not be the verification entity. You may just be accessing the information from the transparency service and not doing anything with it, just passing it along.
No,
So-
I think that's intentional. So a statement that is issued is not ready to be verified yet. What we really want is to be verified are the transparent statements. So it's produced into steps. There is the issuance, and then there is the registration, and then they are verifiable.
I would say it's a submitter, like a person submitting. It depends on your point of view. If you're looking outside in, you would say you're submitting into the machine, and then the receiver or reader or something like that, which is
No, I think that's a bit worse, because the submitter is not the issuer in general. We decided not to
Submitter is
assume
not
they
the
would be the
issuer.
same.
Well, the person that submits it into the transparency service, not person, but the entity that's submitting it into would be called we're going back to this, would be called, okay, so it says issuer there. Yeah.
No, but again, we should not assume that the client of the transparency service that submits a statement for registration is the issuer. It's not. There is as long as the transparency service can verify the signature, it doesn't matter who is submitting it.
Can we give Ori a chance?
So
Yeah.
issuer like this.
So forcing him to type.
There's two issuers in our architecture: the issuer of the signed statement and the issuer of the signed receipt. The transparency service issues the signed receipt. The artifact producer or some other party interested in an artifact is the issuer of the signed statement. The entity that presents the signed statement to the transparency service for registration could be the same entity that created it or someone else who came into possession of it. And in verifiable credentials, it's a three-party model. They have an issuer, person who first puts cryptography on a statement, a holder, a person who comes into possession of a signed statement. That could be the first person, or it could be any number of other people that have gotten this
Consumer.
thing secondhand. And then they have the concept of a verifier. Typically, a verifier only consumes presentations, which is one or more signed statements from a holder. So they have a three-party model, and it's sort of, I guess I would, there is the term issuee. They have talked about using it. There's also the term subject, which gets even more generic. I think for SCITT, the subject of all of the statements is the artifact, or an identifier for the artifact, or an identifier for something related to the artifact. I would avoid the word issuee. I think it's a path to madness. I've seen it really not go well in verifiable credentials. I don't love the term holder, but it does accomplish the job. And adding the word, presentation, you might not like that as well, but it also distinguishes signing something that you're intending to submit to a verifier versus signing something that you're intending for some number of other parties to maybe take into their possession, bundle with other things, and then present later on. So verifiable credentials has a lot of good terminology. Well, I won't say good, but they have a lot of words and philosophy around this. And before you reinvent all of that, I would recommend reading that full three-party model introduction spec on the issuer, holder, and verifier and their unique roles, and the difference between a credential and a presentation. We would probably use the concept of submitting a signed statement to the transparency service. We would say those words, they would say that's a holder making a presentation to a verifier. That's it.
Where is that stuff? You mentioned the verifiable credentials. That sounds pretty good what you're talking about, Ori. I want to make sure I read that in more detail. Okay, thanks.
So I also read it again, but I think it goes into the first class of terminology issues we could be discussing, which is once you have identified the category, which term do we use to refer to it? And unfortunately, between different texts and standards, people have picked different terms, and so that it's doomed to be controversial. I think the more important question is whether we need a different context or we can use the same context, and I think we are still arguing about that, and I would really like to converge on that. In particular, my suspicion at this point is that the introduction of producer and consumers is actually confusing the terminology that we had earlier. And so the question is, do we need to introduce producers and consumers because it introduces important notions that are separate from issuers, transparency services, and verifiers? Or do we need to fuse them with those notions? And I still don't understand what the consensus will be about that. Do we need producer consumers, and or is it enough to use to continue as we did before with all the architecture with issuers, transparency services, and verifiers?
I would be so bold and say, no, we do not need them. In your attempt to fix this, we should avoid them for this round.
So if you agree with that, then trying to get rid of producer consumers and see if it still makes sense with my preference, because they need to be simpler, yes. And I completely get your point that the terms you are choosing, like verifier, is controversial, and I'm happy to do systematic replacements of verifiers by consumers. If you agree, consumer is a better term for that, but at least deduplicating the notions will be really helpful to me.
Yeah, let's stick with verifier, because I think intuitively most people understand that you check something, and probably if it says proof at the moment, you just have to be precise. It's just revisit all the items. Also, terminology does not have to be alphabetical, and we can also compartmentalize it into, I don't know, useful context sections for terminology, if that helps. Some people really do not like that. I do not care. At the very beginning of every introduction sections, we will write, you must be familiar with terms coming from here and other documents, and list them, so that people who really want to understand the text gloss over the glossary first and then start to read the document. So that's a warning that typically every larger, not trivial document has. Yeah, please go with the removal of producer and consumer for your proposal. Consider reusing issuer and verifier as being defined and maybe polishing them. And also, it might be interesting which role does what interaction with which other role in what sequence, and have some scenarios here using those terms. Like the issuer is, I want to say produce right now, producing a signed statement that is then consumed by the transparency service. The transparency service is registering that signed statement and produces a transparent statement now. And the transparent statement is produced, of course, so this chain of things that you create with roles and interact with others and then move them around. So if that is possible with the terminology you are targeting, it will help building sentences describing what you do all the time, right?
Okay. Yes, and I'm more optimistic than that. I think that actually most of the text is already doing that later in the document. But I may be I'm really confused, so I'll definitely double check. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, then I'm fine. Ori, we will hold with a holder for now, and can revisit where a holder might fit in next Tuesday. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's been presentations and holders have been contentious parts of the W3C's take on the three-party model. So I'm happy to give you way more details on that than you'll ever want to hear, whenever you want to hear it.
Yeah,
I
that's
definitely
interesting
like the
point.
idea of leveraging other people's pain and learning from it, not embracing it.
Yeah, I question whether it's good to share this kind of pain with people, but you're welcome to have it if you want it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
really
maybe more fundamentally, the fact that we consider that transparent statements are not held or fully controlled by the issuer is a very important part of transparency. So as an issuer, you don't have full control over your transparent statement. You get to issue it and register it, but then you cannot change your mind, and that's sort of essential. And the holder may assume that those two roles are conflated, which is not what we do.
Well, I see in this verifiable credentials hat, they're focused on a subject is the entity about whom a claim is issued, and they've got a little picture of a person there in their diagram. So they're mostly talking about claims about people. And the difference here is we're talking about claims about artifacts, eventually leading over to products. But that's my first reaction to looking at this. But this is great. I'm glad that you brought this in, Ori. Thanks. Which one was it? Was it the first or the second one? I'm just looking at well, I gave you the use. I was looking at the use cases. Is what I was just looking at. And
you pop the URL?
Yeah, I put it in.
Oh, thank you.
And so, but I'm going to read this over because I think they're talking about a lot of the same types of things, and if we can harmonize this, I think it'd be worth trying.
Okay, we have 9 minutes left. I think this action is relatively well understood. Maybe look at the hard one, as Antoine said, or start doing that, which is issue 91.
Sorry, Hank, before we move on, what's the next steps on this one? So Cedric, you're taking the pen.
So I'm doing a pass on the terminology, trying to see if we can completely remove producer and consumer and stick to verifier and auditor for the categories mentioned in the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can discuss it again next time. But
did we say which terms you're going to use, or you're going to experiment, and that's what you're going to?
Yes, I'm going to experiment with sticking to issuer, transparency service, and verifier, and auditor.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Hey,
yeah,
sorry, you were going to 91.
Auditor is already specific. So auditor and monitor, I think if you would take both into account and, for example, consciously dismiss one, that might make sense and would also address Niels' ask. 91, I think Antoine highlighted, is a structural problem that may take quite some while to fix if we were very lenient on using should. Should needs a justification, typically in standard text. So Hannes calls it when you should follow it and when it is appropriate to ignore the normative language. So that's the justification. You need to write something when it is okay not to do it, so that when you are checking the spec, you can write a certain complement that says, I'm not using this normative statement because I'm a fool. So that seems to be littered all over the document, and typically is up level to a mandatory, so shall or must, or can be a conditional. So there might be conditional text about if you are in certain states, you must. So this, if you restate that, it depends on the chairs, and it depends on RFC ads composition sometimes how well that is received, but they can also reduce the number of shoulds significantly in text. So the real question is, did we just write it from colloquial and we're writing should, or is there some thought behind the actual normative should? And that's the I think I read that out of the issue. Antoine, do you see anything else?
No, I think it's a fine summary. But yeah,
I recall that we use should at places where we disagreed whether to make it normative or not. So it's actually a flag for
to fix me.
conflictual places, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Antoine, do you have a fairly well grasp on the things that really must be, and maybe we should summarize some of the, maybe we should sieve through the document and really go step by step in a session, or maybe you want to take a swag at that, where we could get rid of should statements just because we were uncertain and make rendering them an issue. Like this should is nonsense. What's the actual decision here?
I think the problem I see is the one that Cedric raised, is that in many cases should was used because of disagreement, and I suspect that.
But then we have to agree.
Yeah, so I'm okay with trying to replace them with must, where I think we should replace them with must, but it will not resolve the underlying disagreements on whether.
Yeah, there will be a remaining set of shoulds, and we must come to an agreement, and that will be a working session. So we have to then find them and go through them step by step. But I think we can make a first pass, or maybe you are able to do a first pass, where we can up-level normative language.
Indeed, if someone like Antoine could do a first pass to prepare the discussion, I think that will be the most effective.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna send it to me, but there will be a discussion. Or if there won't be a discussion, then it will kind of. I will probably err on the side of.
But if you can identify the 5 most interesting should to discuss, that would be great.
For example, or the 3 most obvious shoulds that are musts apparently now can also be.
Antoine, what's your alias?
ADL, AD-.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
I had it for a second. Oh, it's literally just ADL. Gotcha. Let me see if I can assign it here. No.
Red Smith is annoying the heck out of me. Are you doing something bad? I just saw you putting in a passport prompt.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know. We are closing up to the top of the hour. I think Steve provides. Do you want to change some contribution access here?
I was just getting Antoine in there.
Oh. You must be at least a read in order to get assigned. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was invited.
Which is a super weird rule. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably expired. Let me accept
Why is
it
it not
quickly.
showing him?
Because I have to accept first. I think that's the problem.
Oh, okay.
Give me a sec. I'll accept.
If you're doing it at org level, you shouldn't have a choice.
Yeah, that's a problem. Every time
oh, it says pending. Yeah.
Yeah, refresh. It should be okay now.
Okay.
Why the heck are you okay?
I refresh this page too. Yeah. Yeah, here we go.
And there we go. Excellent. And basically, to the top of the hour, anything that's blatantly unresolved right now about the things we discussed?
That we're going to solve in 2 minutes?
We get I walked into that one, right? Yes.
Yes.
Then we can solve in 2 minutes. If not, then let's all jump to the next meeting and see us here again next week.
Okay.
Thanks, folks.
Ole,
Thanks.
Bye.
thanks for back.